I came home earlier than expected, a folder of contracts in one hand, the hope of surprising my daughters clutched in the other. As I opened the door, I heard laughter. I followed the sound to the living room, and there I saw him, my brother, comfortable on my sofa, and my wife sitting on his lap as if I had never existed. My daughters were playing a few feet away, oblivious to the scene. I felt the blood boil in my veins. I said nothing at first, just stared at them with a calm that unsettled them both. She was the first to break the silence. We need to talk. We can't hide this anymore. I froze when the next words left her mouth. She admitted they had been together for 2 years, that they were engaged, and that soon they would form a real family. My daughters were listening now, confused. I rose to my feet with a fury that made my hands tremble, pointed to the door, and screamed at her to get out. She tried to calm me, saying everything was already decided, that sooner or later I would understand. The only thing I did was pull out my phone and dial my lawyer. I wasn't going to let them destroy my life without a fight. It was then that my brother spoke, with that characteristic arrogance of his. He said it wasn't just personal. He also planned to displace me in the family company. He told me about clients he had already secured for himself, and how our mother supported him because, according to her, I lacked the vision for the business. His tone was poison poured directly into the wound. It all clicked into place. He didn't just want my wife, he wanted everything I had. The sound of my daughters' voices cut through the air. The eldest asked, crying, what it all meant if her mother wasn't going to live with us anymore. My wife tried to approach her, to console her, but I stepped in her way. You have no right to confuse them any further, I spat in her face. That's when the rage won. I tore the wedding ring from my finger and threw it at the table, shattering a glass into 1,000 pieces. It was the end, and I made that clear in front of everyone. She picked up her handbag with trembling hands and walked out without looking back. My brother shot me a twisted smile before following her, as if he had already won the battle. I slammed the door shut, took a deep breath, and knew that this war was just beginning. The next morning was a minefield. I had barely sat down for breakfast with the girls when my brother appeared as if nothing had happened, a coffee in his hand and the air of a man who owned the place. He spoke of necessary adjustments at the company, that clients trusted him more because he was more approachable, more flexible. I listened with a knot in my stomach, wondering how he had the gall to stand there after the scene from the day before. Before he left, he leaned in and whispered something that still burns in my ears. Sooner or later, I'll have them too, brother. Judges love mothers, and you've always been the unstable one. That comment cut through me. I knew it wasn't an empty threat. My brother never made a move without a plan. What he said about custody forced me to act with a clear head. I finished getting the girls ready for school, feigning normality, and as soon as I dropped them off, I drove straight to my lawyer's office. As I drove, I replayed every detail. 2 years of deceit, my mother's backing of his plot, and now this war for the company and my daughters. I would not let them take what was mine. My lawyer received me without surprise, as if he already sensed what I was about to tell him. I told him everything: the betrayal, the threats, the intention to manipulate the custody arrangement. He advised me to remain calm and not to make a single misstep. The house was protected, separate property, untouchable. What I needed to worry about was proving that I was the stable pillar for my daughters, that my life was orderly and secure compared to the circus they were trying to create. His advice was clear: no emotional outbursts, no mistakes, document everything. Leaving his office, I turned on my phone and was met with a flood of messages from my mother. They weren't neutral, they were thinly veiled orders. Think about the business. Let your brother lead. Don't cling to a dead marriage. This is for the best. Reading that churned my stomach more than any direct threat. It confirmed she was behind it all, supporting their plan as if I were a mere inconvenience. The rage mixed with a cold clarity. It wasn't just my wife and my brother against me anymore. It was an entire family structure built against me. That same day, returning home, I found him again. This time, he was at the entrance, talking to a client, as if the company already belonged to him. He was laughing, making promises, painting a future where I was nothing but an accessory. The client looked at me uncomfortably, as if he had trespassed on foreign territory. My brother, with a triumphant smile, said his goodbyes, and as he passed me, he delivered another stab. Get used to it, brother. This is just the beginning. I stared at him, not answering, because the counterattack was already taking shape within me. The next day, I returned to my lawyer's office, much calmer. I brought copies of my mother's messages and a couple of recordings where my brother talked about taking everything. The lawyer was direct. The house is safe, but your brother isn't playing fair. If he can, he will drag you through the mud to prove you're unstable. You have to armor yourself. Do everything for your daughters. They are your anchor and your best argument in court. His words were a dose of reality. This was no longer just about money or pride. Custody was what was truly at stake. With that in mind, I decided to confront my mother. I went to her house, the same one I grew up in, hoping for at least a shred of empathy. But what I received was a cold, almost corporate speech. She told me she had known about my wife's relationship with my brother for months, that she had allowed it because she saw in him a better leader for the company, that it was better to sacrifice me than to risk the family business. Her words cut deeper than any marital betrayal. She didn't see me as a son, but as an obstacle on her chessboard. I tried to reason with her, reminding her that there were granddaughters involved, that she couldn't endorse such a farce. Her response was brutal. Your daughters will be better off with them in a united home, without your fits of pride. You've always been too visceral. The accusation was calculated. I knew she was repeating the same script as my brother. It was as if they had both rehearsed the strategy: paint me as the unstable one, the impulsive one, the one who was unfit to be a husband or a father. I left that house with a mixture of rage and sorrow. I looked at the family portrait hanging in the entryway and felt that nothing of that past remained. The woman I always thought would be on my side had decided to sell me out for a handful of contracts. In that moment, I understood that the war wasn't just against my brother and my wife, it was against my own mother. And worst of all, she held real power within the company, shares that could give her weight in every decision. Returning to my house, I swore I would not break. If they wanted to paint me as the weak one, I would prove them wrong with my actions. I wasn't going to lose my daughters or let them take what I had built. That betrayal hardened me. What was once pain was now transforming into strategy. If they wanted a war, they would get one. And I had no intention of losing. The first to break the silence was my eldest daughter. One evening after dinner, she asked to speak with me alone in her room. She closed the door carefully and looked at me with a seriousness that didn't belong to her years. Daddy, Mommy, and Uncle say we're going to have a new home, that everything will be better. But I don't want that. I don't want to live with him. I don't want him to be my daddy. Her words shattered my soul, but at the same time, they gave me a renewed strength. I looked her in the eye and promised her that I would fight for her and her sister, that I wouldn't let them be manipulated with fairy tales of an ideal family. I asked her to tell me everything her mother said when I wasn't there. That's when I learned that the pressure was daily: promises of trips, gifts, a happier life with their uncle. The younger one listened without understanding, but the older one had already seen enough to reject it. She confessed they had even made her repeat phrases like, "Daddy is sad and can't take good care of us anymore." My stomach turned. They were using my daughters as weapons, and that, I swore, I would not allow. The next day, when I took them back to the house where their mother now lived, I couldn't contain myself. My brother was at the door waiting for them, wearing that fake smile he used to win over everyone. When he bent down to hug my eldest, she pulled away and said, loud and clear, "You will never be my daddy." The silence was deafening. My wife looked at him, uncomfortable, and I took the opportunity to lock my eyes on them both. They already know the truth. They won't accept the circus you're trying to create. My brother tried to smooth over the scene with a cheap speech about new beginnings and modern families. When my eldest interrupted him, "I already have a family, and it's with my daddy and my sister." Her mother, flustered, tried to quiet her, but I put a stop to it. Let them speak. They have a right to say how they feel. It was the first time I felt the ground shift in my favor. It wasn't just my fight anymore. Now, they were showing their rejection too. I slept little that night, not from anguish, but from determination. My daughters had taken a side, and while that meant the war would intensify, it also gave me the most important backing of all, from the only people who truly mattered. I knew my brother wouldn't stop, that my mother would continue to support him, but now I was certain I wasn't alone. They trusted me, and I was not going to fail them. 3 weeks of silent preparation followed. My lawyer had managed to assemble a solid file with concrete evidence. Emails in which my brother met secretly with key company clients. A bank loan he had obtained by presenting false information. And the juiciest part, messages proving that his relationship with my wife had been going on for over 4 years, not the two they claimed. That detail destroyed the entire facade of a recent love affair they were trying to use as justification. While they thought I was wasting away in silence, I was building the dynamite that would blow their castle of lies to pieces. I launched the first bomb in a strategic meeting with our largest client, the one representing over 40% of the company's annual revenue. My brother had boasted weeks earlier that he had him locked down thanks to his good relationship with the owner's son. What he didn't know was that I had gone directly to the real decision maker, the father. I showed him proof of how my brother had manipulated information to inflate his commissions and used the company name for personal projects. The man, serious and cold, replied, I will do no more business with your brother. You are the only partner I wish to deal with. That sentence was a kill shot because I knew that without that client, my brother had nothing. In parallel, I hired a private investigator. What he discovered left me cold, but it also gave me a weapon my brother would never have imagined. He wasn't just sleeping with my wife. He was maintaining several affairs with women in different cities, using company money to pay for hotels, dinners, and trips. He had a pattern of behavior that painted him as an addict of deceit and lies. Photos, receipts, even testimonies from receptionists who saw him coming and going with different women. Everything was documented, ready to be used at the perfect moment. When I gathered my brother and my mother in the boardroom, I was no longer the betrayed husband or the son labeled as unstable. I was the one holding all the cards. I laid the evidence on the table: the secret meetings, the bank fraud, the investigators' reports. I saw the color drain from my mother's face as she realized she had bet on the wrong horse. My brother, on the other hand, tried to smile, to downplay it all, but each document sank him deeper. You are a fraud, an adulterer, and a thief. My voice boomed in the room, louder than any threat he had ever made to me. And today, the game is over for you. That day, my real counterattack began. The largest client renewed their contract with me and recommended me to other companies in their circle, guaranteeing stability and expansion. My lawyer formally submitted the documentation of the fraud and my brother's immoral conduct, which disqualified him from holding any position of responsibility within the company. And with the photos of his multiple infidelities, I dismantled the idea that he could offer a stable home to my daughters with his new partner. I had reduced him to what he always was: a mediocre trader who thought he could build an empire on my back. The evidence was a controlled demolition. Every document I presented was another brick removed from the building my brother had tried to construct on my ruin. He couldn't raise his voice because everything was sealed with dates, signatures, emails, screenshots, and testimonies. When the lawyer read aloud the clause from the bank loan he had signed with falsified information, I saw him go pale. That move alone was enough to sink him legally. My mother, unable to sustain the farce, remained silent, swallowing her pride. And it was in that vacuum of authority that I decided to crush him with the terms I had written myself: sell me his shares at a fair price, resign from the company immediately, break off his engagement with my wife, and leave the city. There would be no negotiation. He tried to resist with the same arrogance that had carried him through life. He said I couldn't force him, that he would go to court, that he had a right to stay. Then I played my final card: an envelope with photographs of his escapades with various women, all documented by the private investigator. Explain this to a family court judge when you ask for shared custody with the woman you've been cheating with for years. Explain to the clients that you signed contracts while spending company money on hotels with your mistresses. Explain it to your fiancé, who still thinks you're faithful. There was no answer. For the first time in his life, I watched him bow his head. The silence was so heavy, the ticking of the boardroom clock was the only sound. My mother tried to intervene, proposing a less humiliating way out, but I cut her off sharply. You chose a side, mother. You bet against your own son. Now, you will face the consequences. This company is mine. by right and by merit. He is leaving, and you will remain silent. No one answered. My brother signed the papers, his hands trembling. The defiance in his eyes was gone, replaced only by defeat. I simply watched him affix his signature, like a spectator, witnessing the fall of an enemy who had once believed himself invincible. When the lawyer lifted the signed pages, I knew the victory was mine. I asked for the keys to his office, access to the accounts, and reminded him that from that moment on, he had no right to set foot in the company again. My brother tried to murmur something about settling things in private, but I silenced him with a phrase that left him frozen. You no longer exist to me, not as a partner and not as a brother. It was then that I announced I would also be starting proceedings to gain full custody of my daughters. I would not allow two traitors, incapable of even upholding their own lies, to have the right to shape my children's lives. His exile began that very day. He packed what he could in silence, avoiding employees, clients, and even his own fiancée. The news of his downfall spread like wildfire. Fraud, infidelity, a forced resignation. No one wanted to be associated with his name. My mother, defeated in her own game, isolated herself in her house, aware that her gamble had destroyed the last semblance of family we had left. And I, for the first time in months, slept soundly, not because the war was over, but because the enemy had finally accepted his surrender. The custody hearing was the final battle, but I arrived with every advantage. My lawyer presented the evidence, proof of the adulterous affair, my brother's multiple infidelities, their attempts to manipulate my daughters, and even messages where my wife admitted the girls would get used to the new life she was planning. The judge listened, her face impassive, and reviewed every document. When it was my eldest daughter's turn to speak, she did not hesitate. She looked directly at her mother and said, I want to live with my dad. He never lied to me. That single sentence from the mouth of a child shattered their entire defense. The verdict was clear: full custody for me, supervised visits for the mother. My ex-wife tried to weep in the courtroom, claiming she was a repentant mother, that she had been manipulated, that she deserved a second chance. But the evidence was an insurmountable wall. Her words became empty echoes. The judge reminded her that custody is not a prize or a punishment, but a responsibility, and that she had proven herself incapable of prioritizing her daughter's well-being. She left the courthouse a broken woman, her reputation in ruins. The new life she had imagined with my brother was crumbling like a sandcastle against the tide. Meanwhile, at the company, my victory was solidified. My brother was no longer a partner or an employee, and the rumors of his fraud and his affairs circulated among suppliers and clients. The major client, the one he had assured everyone he had under control, not only extended his contract with me, but opened doors to new accounts. The company grew, but more importantly, it was now entirely mine. No shadows, no traitors. Every day I walked into that office, I felt I wasn't just managing a business, I was defending the legacy they had tried to steal from me. With my daughters, life took a new direction. We moved to a different house, not out of necessity, but by choice. I wanted a fresh start in a place untainted by memories of arguments and betrayal. I let them choose their rooms, paint the walls whatever colors they wanted, and make the space feel like a true home, free of lies. My eldest became my right hand, helping me with her younger sister, and every one of her gestures reminded me that the fight had been worthwhile. Their smiles were the ultimate proof that I had won what mattered most. In time, someone new entered my life. It wasn't something I sought out, it simply happened. A woman I met through business, different from my ex-wife in every way, honest, direct, without any hidden agendas. My daughters met her gradually, and to my surprise, they accepted her with a natural ease. She wasn't a replacement for anyone. She was a clean slate. Looking at the three of them together, I understood. The betrayal, as cruel as it was, had set me free. It lifted a dead weight and gave me back to myself. I had recovered my dignity, my self-worth, and above all, a future I could now walk toward with my head held high, accompanied only by those who truly deserve to be by my side.